Imagine losing everything, your home, your hope, your future, until a stranger steps out of the shadows to change it all. In the fading light of a sweltering evening, the air hung heavy over a forgotten corner of an American city where crumbling brick houses lined cracked sidewalks in a neighborhood the world seemed to ignore. Dust swirled in the heat, clinging to the skin of Maria Alvarez, a single mother of 4, as she stood motionless, her youngest daughter, Sofia, clinging to her leg. Maria's face was a map of exhaustion, deep lines etched by months of sleepless nights and endless worry. Her dark eyes, once bright with dreams, now glistened with unshed tears. Hours earlier, the landlord had come, his voice cold as he handed her an eviction notice. "You're out of time," he'd said, not caring that Maria had lost her job at the diner, that her husband had vanished 2 years ago, or that she'd been selling homemade tamales on street corners to afford diapers. The kids, Sofia, 8, with her tear-streaked cheeks, Miguel, 12, trying to look brave, Elena, 10, clutching a worn stuffed bear, and Lucas, 15, staring at the ground, huddled close, their small backpacks stuffed with whatever they could carry. A single garbage bag held their clothes, some torn, some too small. They had nowhere to go. The street stretched endlessly before them, its potholes like wounds in the earth. Maria's chest tightened as Sofia whispered, "Mama, where are we going to sleep?" The question cut deeper than the heat, deeper than the hunger gnawing at their bellies. She had no answer. Her hands trembled as she gripped the bag, her mind racing but finding no escape. The world felt impossibly heavy, each step forward a battle against despair. Before we dive in, drop a 1 in the comments if you're ready for an inspiring story, hit subscribe, and stick around for a jaw-dropping twist at the end. Around them, the neighborhood buzzed faintly with life. Dogs barking, a radio crackling from an open window, the distant hum of traffic from the highway. But for Maria, it was all a blur. She walked, her flip-flops slapping against the pavement, leading her children nowhere. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky a cruel shade of orange, as if mocking their plight. Mrs. Thompson, an older neighbor with kind eyes and a limp, spotted them from her porch. "Maria, honey, come here," she called, her voice soft but firm. She'd seen the landlord's truck earlier, seen the way Maria's shoulders slumped as she left the rented house. Mrs. Thompson's home was small, cluttered with faded photos and knitted blankets. But she opened her door. "You can stay tonight," she said, her hands rough from years of cleaning houses but gentle as she touched Maria's arm. "It ain't much, but it's a roof." Maria's throat tightened. She wanted to refuse, to not burden anyone else, but Sofia's small hand squeezed hers, and she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. Inside, the kids sat on the floor, sharing a plate of rice and beans Mrs. Thompson scraped together. Lucas stared at his portion, pushing it toward Sofia. "I'm not hungry," he lied, his voice barely audible. Maria saw the sacrifice, and it broke her heart all over again. She sat on the sagging couch, her mind spiraling. How had it come to this? She'd worked so hard, taken extra shifts, smiled through exhaustion, but the bills kept piling, and now they were here, homeless, dependent on a neighbor's pity. The shame burned hotter than the evening air. As night fell, the neighborhood grew quieter, the sounds muffled by the weight of darkness. Maria couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, staring at the street, her children curled up on blankets spread across Mrs. Thompson's living room floor. Elena clutched her bear, murmuring in her sleep. Miguel's face twitched, as if fighting nightmares. Sofia's small chest rose and fell, her breaths uneven. Lucas, too old to cry openly, lay still, but Maria knew he was awake, carrying the weight of being the man of the family. She wanted to scream, to beg the universe for a way out, but all she could do was pray silently, her lips moving without sound. The stars outside were faint, swallowed by city lights, and hope felt just as distant. Then, in the stillness of the early morning, a shadow moved. A sleek black SUV rolled slowly down the street, its engine a low hum, its headlights dim. Maria tensed, her mother's instinct kicking in. She pulled the curtain tighter, her heart pounding. The neighborhood wasn't dangerous, but it wasn't safe either. Strangers at this hour rarely meant good news. The SUV stopped across from Mrs. Thompson's house, and a figure stepped out. He was tall, dressed in a plain hoodie, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low. No one else stirred. Mrs. Thompson was asleep, the kids oblivious, but Maria watched, her breath shallow. The man crossed the street, his steps deliberate but unhurried. As he approached the porch, the streetlight caught his face for a moment, and Maria froze. It couldn't be. She'd seen that face on billboards, on TV screens, in the sports bar where she used to wait tables. Cristiano Ronaldo, the soccer star, here, in this broken-down corner of the world. Her mind raced. Was she dreaming? Had exhaustion finally broken her? The man knocked softly on the door, and Maria hesitated, her hands shaking as she opened it just a crack. Up close, he looked different. No flashy clothes, no entourage, just a quiet intensity in his eyes. "Are you Maria?" he asked, his voice low, accented but clear. She nodded, unable to speak. "I heard about you," he said, glancing at the sleeping kids through the open door. "Can we talk outside?" Maria stepped onto the porch, her bare feet cold against the wood. The air was cooler now, but her skin prickled with nerves. Ronaldo stood a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, his posture relaxed but his eyes searching. "I know what happened," he said. "The eviction. The kids. I want to help." Maria's knees buckled, but she caught herself on the porch railing. Help? From him? It didn't make sense. "Why?" she managed to whisper, her voice hoarse. Ronaldo's gaze softened, and for a moment, he wasn't the global icon. He was just a man, standing in the dark, seeing her pain. "Because no one should go through this," he said simply. "Not you. Not them." He nodded toward the house, where Sophia's small form was visible through the window, curled up under a thin blanket. Maria's eyes burned with tears, but she fought them back. She wanted to ask how he knew, why he cared, but the words wouldn't come. Ronaldo reached into the SUV and pulled out a duffel bag. He unzipped it, revealing stacks of groceries, bread, milk, apples, cereal, even a few candy bars. "For tonight," he said, handing it to her. The weight of the bag felt like a lifeline in her hands. "There's more," he added, his voice steady but kind. "I'll come back tomorrow, 9 in the morning. Be here." Before Maria could respond, he was already walking back to the SUV. She stood frozen, the bag heavy in her arms, watching as the vehicle disappeared into the night. Her heart pounded, a mix of disbelief and something else, something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. It was fragile, like a candle flickering in a storm, but it was there. She carried the bag inside, her movements slow, as if moving too fast might shatter the moment. Mrs. Thompson stirred, blinking at the groceries. "Who was that?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. Maria shook her head, still processing. "I don't know," she lied, not ready to share the truth. Not yet. She sat by the kids again, the bag of groceries at her feet. The candy bars caught her eye, and she pictured Sophia's face lighting up at the sight of chocolate. For the first time that night, Maria smiled, a small, trembling thing. She didn't understand why Cristiano Ronaldo, of all people, had shown up. She didn't know how he'd heard about her, maybe through Javier, the community volunteer who'd been trying to help with a fundraiser for her family. Javier had mentioned something about connections last week, but she hadn't thought much of it. Now it felt like a miracle, too big to grasp. She looked at her children, their faces softened by sleep, and felt a fierce determination rise in her chest. She'd keep them safe, no matter what. And maybe, just maybe, tomorrow would bring something better. The night stretched on, but Maria didn't sleep. She sat by the window, the groceries beside her, replaying Ronaldo's words in her mind. "I'll come back." She clung to that promise, her heart daring to believe that the darkness might finally break. As dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky a soft gray, the neighborhood began to stir. A rooster crowed somewhere nearby, and the first cars rumbled down the street. Maria's eyes were heavy, but she forced herself to stay awake, watching the clock on Mrs. Thompson's wall. 8 o'clock, 8:30. Her hands fidgeted, smoothing her worn dress, brushing her hair back with trembling fingers. The kids woke slowly, rubbing their eyes, confused by the groceries but too hungry to ask questions. Sophia tore into a candy bar, her smile a small burst of light in Maria's heart. Miguel helped Elena pour cereal, and Lucas watched silently, his jaw tight. Mrs. Thompson bustled around, making coffee, her presence a quiet comfort. "Whoever that was last night," she said, stirring sugar into her mug. "He's got a good heart." Maria nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She didn't tell Mrs. Thompson it was Ronaldo. She wasn't sure anyone would believe her. The clock ticked closer to 9, and Maria's pulse quickened. She stepped outside, standing on the porch, her eyes scanning the street. The kids followed, sensing something important but not understanding what. Neighbors glanced over, curious but keeping their distance. Then, right on time, the black SUV appeared, its tires crunching against the gravel. Maria's breath caught. He'd kept his word. The vehicle stopped, and Ronaldo stepped out, his cap low, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet intensity. In that moment, Maria knew something was about to change, not just for her, but for all of them. The morning sun climbed slowly, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement of the neighborhood, where hope felt like a stranger that rarely stayed long. Maria Alvarez stood on Mrs. Thompson's porch, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes fixed on the black SUV parked across the street. Cristiano Ronaldo stepped out, his baseball cap pulled low, his plain gray hoodie blending into the early light. No cameras, no entourage, just a man carrying an envelope and a quiet purpose. Maria's heart pounded, her children huddled behind her, their faces a mix of confusion and curiosity. Sophia clutched a half-eaten candy bar from the night before, her eyes wide. Miguel stood tall, trying to mask his nervousness, while Elena hugged her stuffed bear, and Lucas, the eldest, watched Ronaldo with a wary gaze. Mrs. Thompson lingered in the doorway, her coffee mug steaming, her brow furrowed as she tried to place the stranger. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that made the world feel still, as if every breath hung on what would happen next. Ronaldo crossed the street, his steps steady, his eyes meeting Maria's with a warmth that cut through her doubt. "Good morning," he said softly, his accent subtle but unmistakable. Maria nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She felt the weight of the past night, the eviction, the hunger, the fear, pressing against this fragile moment of possibility. Ronaldo held out the envelope, its white surface crisp and unassuming. "This is for you," he said, his voice low, as if sharing a secret meant only for her. Maria's hands trembled as she took it, her fingers brushing the paper, afraid to believe it was real. She glanced at her kids, their eyes locked on her, then back at Ronaldo. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. He smiled, a small, genuine curve of his lips. "Open it." Her hands shook as she tore the envelope, revealing a set of keys and a folded document. The keys glinted in the sunlight, small and silver, but heavy with meaning. She unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the words. A deed, a contract of purchase, a modest 2-bedroom house in her name, a home. Her breath caught, and tears blurred her vision. "Is this real?" she asked, her voice breaking. Ronaldo nodded, his expression steady. "It's yours, a place for you and your kids, a fresh start." Maria's knees buckled, but Lucas caught her arm, his own eyes wide with disbelief. Sophia let out a small gasp, and Elena whispered, "A house?" As if saying it aloud might make it vanish. Miguel just stared, his jaw tight, as if afraid to hope. The neighborhood stirred, a few curious faces peeking from windows or stepping onto porches. Mrs. Thompson moved closer, her mug forgotten, her eyes darting between Maria and the stranger. "Who is this man?" she muttered, but Maria didn't answer. She couldn't. Her world had tilted, and she was still trying to find her footing. Ronaldo knelt to the kid's level, his voice gentle. "You guys like soccer?" he asked, a playful glint in his eyes. Sophia nodded shyly, and Miguel mumbled, "Yeah, a little." Ronaldo chuckled, pulling a small soccer ball from the SUV. "We'll play later, okay? But first, let's see your new home." Maria's tears fell freely now, but she wiped them with her sleeve, trying to hold herself together for her kids. She turned to Mrs. Thompson, who was now openly staring at Ronaldo, her mouth agape as recognition dawned. "Is that?" she started, but Maria shook her head slightly, a silent plea to keep it quiet. Ronaldo didn't seem to notice the growing whispers. He gestured toward the SUV. "Come on," he said. "I'll take you there." The drive was short, just a few blocks to a quiet street where small houses sat in neat rows, their yards modest but tidy. The house was simple, white siding, a small porch, a patch of grass out front, but to Maria it was a palace. Ronaldo parked and the kids spilled out, their eyes wide as they took in the sight. Maria clutched the keys, her heart racing. "This is ours?" Lucas asked, his voice thick with doubt. Ronaldo nodded, handing Maria a second envelope. "There's a little extra," he said quietly, "for furniture, school supplies, whatever you need." She opened it, finding a check, not a fortune, but enough to ease the weight of the coming months. Her hands shook, and she looked at him, searching for words. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice raw. Ronaldo's gaze softened, and for a moment, he looked younger, almost vulnerable. "I grew up with nothing," he said. "My mom worked 3 jobs. I know what it's like to feel the world's against you. No one should feel that way, especially not kids." Before Maria could respond, a voice called out, "Maria, what's going on?" It was Javier, the community volunteer who'd been helping with her fundraiser. He jogged over, his worn sneakers kicking up dust, his face a mix of confusion and excitement. "I got a call last night," he said, glancing at Ronaldo. "Someone said they wanted to help. I didn't know it was you." He trailed off, clearly starstruck but trying to play it cool. Ronaldo shook his hand, his smile easy. "Thanks for the tip, man," he said. "You're doing good work." Maria's mind raced. So that's how he'd found her. Javier's fundraiser, a small online plea for help, had reached Ronaldo through some connection she'd never understand. She wanted to ask more, but Ronaldo was already leading them to the house. He unlocked the door, and the kids rushed inside, their voices echoing with wonder. The house was small but clean, with fresh paint and a faint smell of pine. A basic couch sat in the living room, a table in the kitchen, and beds in the bedrooms. Simple, but more than Maria had dared to dream of. Sophia ran to a window, pressing her face against the glass. "Mama, there's a yard," she squealed. Elena hugged her bear tighter, a smile breaking through her shyness. Miguel kicked the soccer ball lightly against the wall, testing the space. Lucas lingered near Maria, his eyes still guarded but softening. Outside, a woman approached, her clipboard in hand and a warm smile on her face. "You must be Maria," she said. "I'm Miss Carter from the community center. Javier called me." She glanced at Ronaldo, her eyes widening briefly before she refocused. "I'm here to help you settle in. Job leads, school enrollment, whatever you need." Maria's chest tightened with gratitude. This wasn't just a house. It was a lifeline, a network of support she hadn't known existed. Ms. Carter handed her a folder with resources, local job listings, a food pantry schedule, even a contact for free tutoring for the kids. Maria's hands shook as she took it, overwhelmed by the sudden shift in her world. Ronaldo watched quietly, his presence steady but unobtrusive. He didn't seek attention, didn't pose for photos, or call attention to his role. Instead, he turned to the kids, tossing the soccer ball to Miguel. "Show me what you got," he said, stepping into the yard. The kids followed, their laughter breaking the morning's tension. Maria watched, her heart swelling as Miguel dribbled the ball, Sophia cheering him on. Ronaldo joined in, his movements effortless, his laughter genuine. For a moment, he wasn't a superstar, just a guy playing with kids, his joy as real as theirs. Mrs. Thompson had followed in her old sedan, parking crookedly across the street. She stepped out, her eyes misty as she took in the scene. "Maria, this is a miracle," she whispered, gripping Maria's hand. "Who is he?" Maria hesitated, then leaned close. "It's Ronaldo," she said softly. Mrs. Thompson's jaw dropped, but she nodded, understanding the need for discretion. The neighborhood was waking up now, and whispers spread like wildfire. A few kids on bikes slowed down, staring at the man playing soccer in the yard. "Is that?" one whispered, but Javier waved them off, keeping the moment private. Maria felt a pang of fear. What if this got out? If reporters swarmed? If Ronaldo regretted helping? But he seemed unfazed, his focus on the kids. He knelt beside Sophia, showing her how to kick the ball, his hand steadying hers. Elena watched, her bear forgotten, a shy smile creeping onto her face. Lucas hung back, but even he couldn't resist, eventually joining the game, his guarded expression softening as Ronaldo praised his footwork. As the sun climbed higher, Ronaldo stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. "I've got to go," he said to Maria, his voice quiet. "But you're gonna be okay. I know it." She wanted to thank him, to pour out the gratitude that burned in her chest, but the words stuck. Instead, she hugged him, her arms tight, her tears soaking his hoodie. He hugged her back, brief but warm, then turned to the kids. "Keep practicing," he said, winking at Miguel. "You've got potential." He handed Maria a card with a number. "For emergencies," he said. "Call Javier if you need me." Then he was gone, slipping into the SUV, the engine humming as he drove away. Maria stood in the doorway of her new home, the keys heavy in her hand, the kids' laughter echoing behind her. The neighborhood watched, some in awe, some skeptical. But Maria didn't care. This was real. The house, the hope, the chance to start again. It was all real. Miss Carter stayed, helping Maria unpack the few belongings they'd brought, while Mrs. Thompson bustled in the kitchen, insisting on making lunch. Javier lingered, his grin wide. "I didn't think he'd actually come," he admitted. "But he saw your story online and called me right away, said he wanted to do something real." Maria sat on the couch, the deed in her lap, her kids playing outside. The weight of the past months, losing her job, her husband's abandonment, the eviction, still lingered, but it was lighter now, like a bruise beginning to fade. She thought of Ronaldo's words, a fresh start. She thought of her kids, their faces bright with possibility. Sophia ran inside, her hands dirty from the yard, her smile wide. "Mama, can we plant flowers?" she asked. Maria nodded, her own smile breaking through. For the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. The neighborhood buzzed with rumors, but Maria kept Ronaldo's secret, just as he'd asked. She knew this wasn't about fame or headlines. It was about her kids sleeping in beds tonight, about a door she could lock, about a future she could fight for. As the day faded, Maria stood in the yard, watching her children play, the soccer ball bouncing between them. Somewhere, Ronaldo was back in his world, but here, in this small house, he'd left something bigger than himself. A spark of hope that would burn for years to come. The sun hung low over the neighborhood, its golden light softening the edges of the modest houses, where life pulsed with a quiet resilience. Months had passed since Maria Alvarez and her 4 children moved into their new home, a gift from Cristiano Ronaldo, whose silent act of kindness had reshaped their world. The small house, with its white siding and patch of grass, stood as a beacon of hope on the street. Maria stood in the kitchen, her hands dusted with flour, rolling dough for tamales she'd sell at the weekend market. The aroma of simmering corn husks filled the air, mingling with the laughter of Sofia and Elena, who were coloring at the table. Miguel practiced soccer tricks in the yard, the ball thudding rhythmically against his sneakers, while Lucas, now 16, studied at a desk crammed into the corner, his textbooks dog-eared but cherished. The house was alive, cluttered with drawings taped to the walls, a vase of wildflowers Sophia had picked, and the faint hum of a radio playing oldies. Maria's heart swelled as she watched her kids, their faces no longer shadowed by fear. The weight of the eviction, the nights on Mrs. Thompson's floor, the gnawing hunger. They were memories now, not chains. She'd found a part-time job at a local bakery, thanks to Ms. Carter, the social worker who'd become a steady presence. Maria's tamale business was growing too, her recipes drawing crowds at the market. Each sale felt like a step toward dignity, a way to honor the second chance she'd been given. Outside, the neighborhood had changed too. The ripple of Ronaldo's gesture spread beyond Maria's doorstep. Mrs. Thompson, inspired by the kindness she'd witnessed, started a weekly potluck, her porch crowded with neighbors sharing plates of fried chicken, rice, and homemade pies. Javier, the community volunteer, organized a cleanup day, and kids on bikes joined in, hauling trash bags with pride. The street felt lighter, as if one act had reminded everyone that hope could take root even in hard ground. Maria saw it in small moments. A neighbor dropping off school supplies for Elena, another offering to fix Miguel's bike. But the story of Ronaldo's gift was still a whisper, a half-believed tale. Some neighbors swore it was a myth, that Maria had lucked into the house through a charity. Others, like Mrs. Thompson, knew the truth but kept it close, respecting the quiet way Ronaldo had moved through their world. Maria didn't mind the skepticism. She didn't need anyone to believe. Every night, when she locked the door and tucked her kids into bed, she felt the truth in her bones. The house was hers, Her kids were safe, and that was enough. One afternoon, as Maria prepped tamales, a knock came at the door. It was Emily, a young reporter from the local paper, her notebook tucked under her arm, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Maria, can we talk?" she asked, her voice gentle but eager. Javier had let slip a hint of the story at a community meeting, and Emily, who'd grown up 2 streets over, couldn't resist digging deeper. Maria hesitated, wiping her hands on her apron. She'd avoided attention, wary of turning Ronaldo's gift into a spectacle. But Emily's smile was kind, her questions soft. "I just want to understand," she said, sitting at the kitchen table as Sophia offered her a crayon drawing. Maria sighed, glancing at the kids, then began to speak. She told of the eviction, the night of despair, the SUV pulling up in the dark. She described Ronaldo's quiet voice, the groceries, the keys, the deed. Her words were slow, heavy with emotion, but she didn't cry. She'd cried enough. Emily scribbled notes, her eyes wide, but she promised to keep Ronaldo's name out of print unless he approved. "I checked the deed," she said, almost sheepishly. "It's real. A trust in his name bought the house, but why didn't he tell anyone?" Maria smiled, her eyes distant. "Because he didn't do it for applause. He did it for us." Emily's visit stirred something in Maria. She'd been so focused on survival, paying bills, feeding the kids, building her business, that she hadn't stopped to reflect on how far they'd come. Lucas was excelling in school, his dream of college no longer a fantasy. Miss Carter had helped him apply for scholarships, and his math teacher, Mr. Rivera, stayed late to tutor him. Miguel, inspired by Ronaldo's soccer game in the yard, had joined a local team, his confidence growing with every goal. Elena, once so shy, was reading books aloud to Sofia, her voice clear and proud. And Sofia, the youngest, had planted a small garden out front, her marigolds blooming in bursts of yellow. Maria felt a pride so fierce it hurt. She'd fought for this life, but she hadn't done it alone. Ronaldo's gift had been the spark, Miss Carter's guidance the fuel, Mrs. Thompson's kindness the warmth. Even Javier, with his endless energy, had become family, stopping by with groceries or news of community events. Maria wanted to thank them all, but words felt small compared to what they'd given her. One evening, as the kids ate dinner, another knock came. Maria opened the door, and her heart stopped. There stood Ronaldo, in jeans and a faded t-shirt, his cap tilted low. The kids froze, forks halfway to their mouths, then erupted in cheers. Sofia ran to him, hugging his legs, while Miguel shouted, "You're back!" Elena beamed, and Lucas, usually so reserved, grinned wide. Maria's hands flew to her mouth, tears pricking her eyes. "I didn't think I'd see you again," she said, her voice thick. Ronaldo smiled, his eyes crinkling. "I wanted to check on you," he said simply, stepping inside. The house felt smaller with him in it, but warmer too. He carried a backpack, which he set on the table, pulling out school supplies, notebooks, pencils, a calculator for Lucas. "For the new school year," he said, then handed Maria an envelope. "And this, for their future." Inside was a letter outlining a small scholarship fund, enough to cover college applications or trade school for the kids. Maria shook her head, overwhelmed. "You've done too much," she said. But Ronaldo waved her off. "It's not about me," he said. "It's about them." They sat in the yard, the kids showing Ronaldo their drawings, Miguel dribbling the soccer ball, Elena reciting a poem she'd written for school. Ronaldo listened, his attention full, his laughter easy. Maria watched, her heart full. He wasn't the superstar from TV. He was just a guy who cared, who remembered what it was like to struggle. Mrs. Thompson stopped by, her eyes twinkling as she recognized him. "Your trouble, you know that?" she teased, and Ronaldo laughed, hugging her like an old friend. Javier arrived too, his grin wide. "Man, you're making my job too easy," he joked, but his eyes were misty. The evening stretched on, the air cool, the stars bright. Before he left, Ronaldo pulled Maria aside. "You're strong," he said. "Stronger than I could ever be. Keep going." She nodded, tears falling, and hugged him tight. He slipped into his SUV, waving once before driving off, the night swallowing him as quietly as he'd come. The next week, Maria was invited to speak at a community center event, a gathering for teens facing their own struggles. She stood at the podium, her hands sweaty, her dress simple but clean. The kids sat in the front row, their faces proud. "I'm not special," she began, her voice steady. I'm just a mom who hit rock bottom. But someone saw me, someone believed in me, and that changed everything. She told her story, not for pity, but to show that kindness could shift the world. The teens listened, some crying, some nodding. One boy, his hoodie pulled tight, raised his hand. Was it really Ronaldo? He asked. Maria smiled, neither confirming nor denying. It was someone who cared, she said. That's what matters. The room erupted in applause, not for fame, but for the truth in her words. Afterward, a group of teens started a mentorship program inspired by her story, with Javier and Ms. Carter leading the charge. The neighborhood bloomed, food drives, free tutoring, a soccer clinic for kids. Maria's tamales became a staple at every event, her smile a symbol of resilience. Years later, the house still stood, its walls covered in photos. Lucas at his college acceptance ceremony, Miguel scoring a goal, Elena reading at a library event, Sofia with her garden. Maria, now a local hero, never sought fame, but her story spread, a quiet legend of compassion. Ronaldo never spoke of it, dodging questions in interviews with a knowing smile. The best goals are the ones no one sees, he'd say, and Maria, watching on her small TV, would nod, her heart full. She'd hung a sign in the living room, written in Sofia's careful handwriting, "Home is where hope lives." The neighborhood, once a place of struggle, now thrived, its people bound by a shared belief. One act of kindness could change everything. Maria walked the streets, her steps light, her tamale cart a familiar sight. She'd stop to help a neighbor, share a meal, or listen to a story. And always, she carried Ronaldo's lesson. Greatness isn't in the spotlight. It's in the quiet moments, when you choose to see someone else's pain and do something about it. The story of Cristiano Ronaldo's quiet act of kindness, transforming the life of Maria Alvarez and her 4 children, resonates deeply, stirring emotions and offering profound lessons that can shape how we live. It's a tale that transcends the glamour of fame, revealing the raw power of compassion in a world often overshadowed by self-interest. As I reflect on Maria's journey, from the despair of eviction to the hope of a new home, I'm struck by the layers of humanity woven into this narrative. It's not just about a celebrity giving a house, it's about seeing someone in pain, acting without fanfare, and sparking a ripple effect that lifts an entire community. The story's emotional weight lies in its authenticity. Ronaldo's choice to act in the shadows, Maria's resilience, and the community's transformation. Each element offers insights that we can carry into our own lives, urging us to look beyond ourselves and embrace the quiet strength of kindness. The first thing that hits me is Ronaldo's selflessness. In a culture obsessed with likes, shares, and viral moments, he chose silence. No cameras, no press releases, just a man moved by a family struggle. This challenges the American ideal of success, where achievements are often measured by public applause. Ronaldo's actions remind us that true impact doesn't need a spotlight. It's in the small, unseen moments, helping a neighbor with groceries, listening to a friend's troubles, or volunteering without posting about it. I'm inspired to rethink my own motivations. How often do I act for recognition rather than genuine care? The lesson here is clear. Greatness lies in doing good for its own sake. In my life, I can apply this by checking my intentions. Am I helping to help or to be seen? Whether it's tipping a server generously or offering a ride to someone in need, I want my actions to echo Ronaldo's humility, not his fame. Maria's resilience is another emotional anchor. Her story, losing her job, her husband, her home, yet fighting for her kids, mirrors the struggles many face in America's overlooked corners. Her pain is palpable, the shame of eviction, the fear of failing her children, the weight of having no answers. Yet, she never gave up. Even in her darkest moments, she walked forward, sold tamales, and accepted help with grace. This hits hard because it reflects the grit required to survive hardship. In the US, where the pull-yourself-up mentality is celebrated, Maria's story adds nuance. She didn't do it alone. She had Ronaldo, Mrs. Thompson, Javier, and Miss Carter. It reminds me that strength isn't just about independence. It's about knowing when to lean on others. In my own life, I can apply this by embracing community. If I'm struggling, I'll reach out, whether to a friend or a local resource. And when I see someone else drowning, I'll offer a hand, not judgment. Maria's journey teaches us that resilience is built through connection, not isolation. The community's transformation is perhaps the story's most powerful lesson. Ronaldo's act didn't just save Maria, it inspired a neighborhood. Mrs. Thompson's potlucks, Javier's cleanups, the tutoring and food drives, these sprang from one spark of compassion. This speaks to the American spirit at its best. People coming together not because they're forced to, but because they're inspired. It's a reminder that kindness is contagious. In a country often divided by politics, race, or class, this story shows how one act can bridge gaps. I'm moved by how a single gesture turned skeptics into believers, cynics into helpers. I can apply this by starting small in my own community. Maybe it's organizing a book drive for kids or checking on an elderly neighbor. The point is, I don't need to be rich or famous to make a difference. A single act, buying coffee for a stranger, mentoring a teen, can start a chain reaction. The story challenges me to be the spark, not wait for someone else to light it. Emotionally, the story tugs at the heart because it's universal. Who hasn't felt Maria's despair, that sinking fear of losing everything? Who hasn't longed for a Ronaldo to show up? Not with a house, but with hope. The kid's joy, Sophia's garden, Miguel's soccer dreams, Lucas's college aspirations, reminds me of the innocence and potential we all want to protect. Ronaldo's quiet exit, his refusal to seek praise, stirs admiration, but also a pang of conviction. Could I act with such humility? The story's power lies in its contrast to our noisy, self-promoting world. It's a call to prioritize substance over show. In American culture, where success is loud, think Super Bowl ads or influencer posts, this story is a quiet rebellion. It says the real heroes are the ones who don't need a hashtag. The lessons I take away are practical and profound. First, act with intention. Ronaldo didn't stumble into helping Maria. He sought her out through Javier's fundraiser. I can be intentional too, scanning my community for needs, whether it's a struggling family or a lonely classmate. Second, embrace vulnerability. Maria's willingness to accept help, despite her pride, opened the door to change. I can practice this by being honest about my own needs and offering support without judgment. Third, think long-term. Ronaldo's scholarship fund and Maria's tamale business show that true help empowers, not just rescues. I can apply this by investing in others' futures, tutoring a kid, donating to a scholarship, or teaching a skill. Finally, stay humble. Ronaldo's silence is a model for giving without ego. I can practice this by celebrating others' successes and keeping my own contributions low-key. This story also challenges me to redefine success. In America, we often chase wealth, status, or followers. But Ronaldo, already at the top, found meaning in a quiet act. Maria, with nothing, found strength in perseverance. Success isn't always a corner office or a viral video. Sometimes it's a child sleeping safely or a neighbor's smile. I want to live with that perspective, measuring my days by the good I do, not the praise I get. The story's emotional core, hope rising from despair, reminds me that no matter how dark life gets, one act of kindness can change everything. I'm inspired to be that change, whether it's a small gesture or a bold move. If this story of compassion and resilience touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button to spread the love, share this video with your friends to inspire them, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us what it means to be human. Drop a comment below, tell us what you do in Ronaldo's or Maria's shoes, or share a time when kindness changed your life. Let's keep this ripple of hope going.